Cruz, and Dr. Nikhil is from Mumbai, practicing in Santa Cruz, and he's again a very precise surgeon and likes to do his calculations that way. Let's hear from him.
Good morning, one and all. My topic for today is what's your game plan, planning and toric IOL calculations. Now, planning for a toric IOL calculation is the most important step before we go ahead and actually implant one. The first thing that we all need to do is to confirm the amplitude of the cylinder. So obviously we see the patient's acceptance, and also we use two different modalities. That means two instruments which give us the keratometry. So here I have shown the keratometry, one on an IOL master and two on a pentacam. On the left is a list of the different instruments available and their principles. So it is always preferable to use a machine with a different principle and compare it to another one and be 100% sure before we proceed to go ahead and implant a toric IOL. What we use as a topographer regularly is the pentacam, and this is a holiday EKR detailed map. This gives us the zone by zone toricity as we see at the 1, 2, 3, 4 mm zones. Now, here is a case example of an irregular cornea. If we see here, the EKR 65 mean, which is given by the EKR map, shows us that the toricity is skewed, is not very widely skewed, it is clubbed together, and the amplitude of the toricity also is very close by. So this is a irregular cornea and is a very good candidate for a toric IOL. As compared to this, which we see where the toricity is very vastly skewed, there are no tall peaks. And even if we see here, the EKRs, the astigmatism EKR 65 is widely skewed from 1.43 diopters to 0.22 diopters. And such a patient will not do well with a toric IOL and should be, and a simple monofocal IOL should be implanted in them. Now, what are the different errors in measurement while planning for a toric IOL? Is one of them is a work we did at my alma mater, Narayan Netralaya, where if the patient is not touching the headband of the instrument properly, it can cause not only a difference in the amplitude, but also a difference in the axis of the cylinder. Up to 10-degree difference in the axis and 1 diopter in magnitude can be seen. Now coming to the IOL calculations can either be done by various online calculators or image-guided systems. The online calculators can obviously be the Barrett's toric IOL calculator, which is freely available on the ASCRS and APACRS websites, or individual company calculators which are available. Image-guided systems like the Callisto and Virion have inbuilt calculation systems, and one can proceed with that too. Coming to the online calculators, like I said, the Barrett Online Toric Calculator, this is freely available on the website. You have to enter the different keratometry values, the axial length, the anterior chamber depth, your refraction, your SIA, which is a surgically induced astigmatism, which one can calculate on the Dr. Hill's website. The lens thickness and white to white can also be added, which gives you more accurate readings because it also takes into consideration the effective lens position. This is the sheet which you get later on. The importance of Barrett Toric calculator is that it also takes into consideration the posterior corneal astigmatism, which plays a role also. It also takes into consideration the effective lens position, like I said, and hence gives you more accurate values. Now, why is taking PCA into consideration important? Is because if PCA is ignored, in a case of with the rule astigmatism, you usually have overcorrection, and against the rule astigmatism, you usually have undercorrections. Now, coming to there are various different company calculators based on which toric IOL you are placing, which is freely available. Now, coming to the image-guided systems, I'm going to be talking in brief about the Virion image-guided system. This is the pre-op planning sheet where we see what you can first do is compare your keratometry from your optical biometer like the Lenstar or the IOL Master to the Virion keratometry done. You can see which axis, which K readings on the axis are the closest, and choose that. Once you enter the biometry data, you could even select which formula you want. It has a list of different formulas, including the Barrett's IOL formula. And based on this, you can also fashion where you want to place your incisions, the width of the incision, and you can decide based on that which IOL, which toric IOL to go in for. If you want, you can also with the toric IOL even have a paired arc if you want to do a combined procedure. Now, this is how the page looks eventually. It also gives you the option for an SIA optimization where you can optimize. You can put in the value. You don't need to do it online. You put in all your pre and post-op keratometry values here itself, and you can optimize your SIA. Obviously, intraoperatively, it gives you the overlay on your microscope for which you can make sure you can do a proper IOL placement. I'll just run through a few case examples in which we can decide whether we should go ahead with a toric IOL or not. The first example here is of a patient who accepts only a 0.25 cylinder. When we did his pentacam on the topography, the astigmatism shows a 1.4 diopter. Now, what we fail to understand is why is there a discrepancy? And if there is a discrepancy, should we be putting a toric IOL or just a simple plain monofocal IOL? Now, here comes the role of an aberrometry. What we see on an aberrometer, an eye trace aberrometer gives us all three, that is the internal, corneal, and the total eye values, aberrations. The internal is the aberrations that is induced by the lens. So what do we see here? That the patient has a high corneal astigmatism, but which is compensated by the lens. The lens is here compensating for that. And that is why overall the patient has a low total astigmatism and he is accepting a very low amplitude of cylinder. But on removal of the lens, the cylindrical, the corneal astigmatism will be manifested, and hence this patient would do well with a toric IOL. A second example here, the patient accepts a cylinder of 2 diopters and even the topography shows a similar value. No discrepancy in this case, and a toric IOL can very well be planned for this patient, which is again proved by the aberrometry, which shows the corneal astigmatism to be high, very low internal astigmatisms, and that is why the patient accepts also preoperatively a high cylinder. Coming to my final case example, here the patient accepts a cylinder of 1.75 diopters, but shows a very low astigmatism on the keratometry. Again, the discrepancy where we don't know what to do, and we fall back to our tool, the aberrometer. Here again, what we see is the corneal astigmatism is relatively low as compared to the lenticular astigmatism. And hence, on removing the lens, the lenticular astigmatism is gone and only the low corneal astigmatism is there. And one need not use a toric IOL for correction of same. So toric IOLs, in what degree of astigmatism can we go ahead and implant one? With the rule astigmatism, preferably only above a diopter. Against the rule astigmatism, with the new tools right now today, even anything above 0.7 diopters should be corrected with a toric IOL. What about the higher range? So usually all the different companies correct up to 4.5 diopter cylinder with a toric IOL. That is the T9 version is mostly the highest. Over and above that, you need to customize your IOL. You get the Ultima group, the Acreol group can customize a toric IOL for high degrees of astigmatism too. Here we see a patient of almost 12 diopters of astigmatism. You can get a customized IOL and the patient does well with that. Coming to the last point of toric IOL stability. So usually toric IOLs are very stable. The newer generation IOLs fuse well with the posterior capsule and hence do not rotate. But in patients with axial length more than 25 millimeters, that is high myopes, they usually show poor toric IOL stability. These are the papers which have already been published and it's well documented. So what we do intraoperatively in these patients is that we implant a CTR ring. And we have seen in a study that we've undertaken at our center that implantation of a toric IOL with a CTR ring shows better stability and no rotation as compared to when a CTR is not placed in a high myope, there's a rotation of a toric IOL. And as we well know, a rotation of a toric IOL can per degree rotation, there is a 3.3% loss of dioptric power. And hence we advocate that all patients above an axial length of 25 should also be implanted with a CTR prior to the toric implant. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Nikhil. It was a very elaborate and a very excellent presentation. Congratulations to you.
Ma'am.
Yeah. So I'd like to ask you, like a patient comes to your clinic, so and he needs a cylinder, right? He has a cylinder, you've done a calculation, but the patient is also suffering from a mild dry eye. So would you give him some lubricants and then ask him to come back, or do you proceed? Like, what is your take at that time?
Definitely, ma'am. We would first want to correct the dry eye problem also, because in a patient of dry eye, the keratometry values may also vary. We've seen there is a discrepancy in the keratometry values. Hence, I would start the patient on lubricants and other treatment for the dry eye first. And once the dry eye issues improves to some extent, then repeat the keratometry. Again, repeat the keratometry on 2 different instruments. And also during the keratometry, what we could do is usually they say you should not be instilling any kind of drops before performing a keratometry because the values would be skewed. So making sure of that before the keratometry is performed.
Okay, and do you also take care of the integrated K readings if you have different K readings from different devices?
Yes. So what we do is that, as I said, because we have an image guided system. What we do is we take a K reading, one from your normal optical biometer, be it your IOL master or your Lensa, etc. Compare it with the image guided system, because the principle on which they both run are different. And obviously, you always have to compare the both of them. And if they both are not comparable, then you decide which system you are more trusting. A system which usually scans a central cornea would be something that you would go in. You would tend to rely on more than the ones that have a paracentral corneal keratometry readings.
Thank you, Dr. Nikhil. Do we have further questions from Dr. Shilpa or Dr. Vevikar, Ajay sir?
Yeah, excellent presentation, Nikhil.
Thank you, sir.
I would like to elaborate a little more on Barrett median K. That if we have 3 machines, okay, and this is for, okay, if you have 3 machines and K readings, the cylinder and the axis are absolutely matching, we can go by any one of them. And if they are slightly away from each other, then we can use Barrett median K. And
Yes,
if they are totally helter-skelter, probably because of the dry eye, as Dr. Swati said, I will fall back on manual keratometry, because all these keratometries are dynamic keratometries, what we mentioned up till now. And manual keratometry is a static keratometry. So it is not dependent that much on the dry eye. So I would fall back on that.
Thank you, sir, for the tip. And Dr. Ajay, Dr. Bhomik, would you like to say something?
I still, as Dr. Vivekar said, I still go with all the 3, have all the 3, and most of the time I'm doing on the manual itself, because my manual guy who is doing it for last 15 years, I got it spot on for 90. It's only in those there are wide difference. Maybe I just, if it is too much of a difference, I just forgo that case. I tell the patient that don't go in for a toric if it is too much. Maybe I'm missing out irregular astigmatism or something. So, but yes, manual is the last